What if the most painful moment of your life, that moment when your head dropped, when your name was spoken with disappointment, when you looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at you? What if that moment was not your ending, but the secret beginning of everything you were always meant to become? What if shame was never sent to destroy you, but to rebuild you at a deeper level than comfort ever could? What if every great man you have ever admired, every legend whose name echoes through history, every person who carries success like it was made for them, what if every single one of them first sat in the darkness of their own humiliation before they ever touched the light of their greatness? You have been told that shame is a sign of weakness, but I am here to tell you today, shame is the forge. And you, my friend, are the steel. Stay with me, because what I am about to share with you will completely change the way you see your failures, your shame, and most importantly, yourself. What if the greatest lie ever told to mankind was not about money, not about power, not about politics, but about shame? What if everything you were taught about feeling ashamed of your failures, your mistakes, your broken chapters, what if all of it was completely and utterly wrong? Because today, I want to take you somewhere most people are too afraid to go. I want to take you into the room where greatness is actually born. And that room, my friend, does not look like a boardroom. It does not look like a library filled with strategy books. It does not look like a mountain peak bathed in golden sunlight. That room looks like the floor you collapsed on. That room smells like the tears you swallowed in silence. That room is the exact moment when everything fell apart and you stood there, exposed, humiliated, and completely alone, wondering how in the name of God you were going to survive this. That is where success begins, not in the celebrating, not in the planning, not in the dreaming, but in the surviving of shame. Now I want you to think, really think, about every man in history who carried success with a kind of quiet confidence that made you stop and stare. The men who walked into rooms and the energy shifted. The men who spoke and people leaned forward. The men who built empires not with inherited money, but with forged character. What did every single one of them have in common? They had all been broken first. They had all stood in the public square of life and been humiliated. They had all made decisions that cost them everything. They had all experienced the moment when the world looked at them and said, "You are not enough. You failed. You do not belong here." And here is what separates the great from the forgotten. The great ones did not run from that shame. They did not build walls around it. They did not pretend it never happened or quietly bury it beneath a polished image. They faced it. They looked directly into the eyes of their shame with trembling hands and a broken spirit, and they said, "You do not get to define me. You only get to refine me." And that distinction, that single courageous act of facing shame rather than fleeing it, that is the difference between a man who achieves something and a man who becomes something. See, the world has sold you a dangerous idea. The world has told you that successful people are the ones who never stumble, that leaders are the ones who are always polished, always strategic, always composed, that the path to greatness is a clean, straight line moving upward with precision and grace. But that is a lie. And deep in your bones, you already know it is a lie, because you have lived enough life to see the cracks in that story. You have watched people who appeared perfect collapse when real pressure arrived. You have seen men who never knew failure become fragile and cruel when the world stopped applauding them. You have witnessed the hollow emptiness in the eyes of people who built success on a foundation that was never tested by fire. Because success that is never earned through shame is like a house built on sand. It looks magnificent from the outside, but the first storm, the first real storm, will bring every single wall down. But the man who builds his success on the foundation of faced shame, that man is different. He builds on rock. He builds on the kind of certainty that only comes from having survived the unsurvivable. He builds with the tools of a man who has been stripped of everything and discovered that even at zero, even at the very bottom, there was still something inside him that refused to die. And that something, that indestructible, unnameable, burning force inside a man who has stared shame in the face and not blinked, that is the real currency of success. Not money, not talent, not connections, not intelligence, unbroken will. Now I want to speak directly to someone listening to me right now. Someone who is carrying something heavy, someone who made a mistake, maybe a public one. Maybe you lost a business. Maybe you lost a relationship because of your own poor choices. Maybe you said something, did something, became something for a period of time that you are deeply ashamed of. Maybe people talked about you. Maybe people still talk about you. Maybe you have replayed that moment 10,000 times in the quiet darkness of 3 o'clock in the morning. I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it. That shame you are carrying, it is not a punishment. It is a preparation. Every pound of shame you feel right now is building muscle in your soul that comfort never could. Every sleepless night spent wrestling with regret is installing a level of awareness and empathy in your character that arrogant men will never possess. Every moment you spend sitting in the wreckage of your choices, choosing to face it rather than flee it, is writing a chapter in your story that will one day become the very foundation others come to for strength. The man who has never been ashamed carries his success like a costume. He wears it beautifully, but the moment someone pulls at a thread, the whole thing unravels because it was never real. It was never earned. It was never attached to anything deep enough to hold. But the man who has walked through shame, the man who has sat in the fire and emerged not unburned but refined, that man carries his success like a second skin, because it is his, because no one can take it from him, because he knows exactly what it cost, and that knowledge gives him a kind of calm power that cannot be manufactured, faked, or purchased. Think about what happens when shame is not faced. Think about the man who fails and immediately covers it with excuses, who blames others for his collapse, who reinvents the story so that he is always the victim and never the student. What happens to that man? He repeats the same patterns. He makes the same mistakes with different names and different locations. He carries the bitterness of a man who was wronged because in his story, he is always the one who was wronged, never the one who was responsible. And that bitterness, that unprocessed shame disguised as anger, becomes a ceiling above his head that he can never break through, no matter how hard he pushes, because you cannot move forward while carrying a lie about where you have been. Shame, when it is run from, becomes a prison. But shame, when it is faced, when it is sat with, studied, understood, and accepted, becomes the most powerful teacher a man will ever have in his entire life. And here is the part that is going to shake something loose in you. The greatest men were not great in spite of their shame. They were great because of what their shame taught them. Their failures gave them their philosophy. Their humiliations gave them their hunger. Their breakdowns gave them their breakthroughs. Their darkest chapters gave them the deepest understanding of human struggle. And it was that understanding that made people trust them, follow them, and believe in them. Because people do not ultimately follow perfection. People follow truth. And there is no truth more powerful than the truth of a man who says, I fell, I was broken, I was ashamed, and I chose to rise anyway. That is not a story of weakness. That is the oldest and most sacred story of strength that has ever existed in human civilization. So what must you do? What is the practical, real, actionable truth that separates the men who are transformed by shame from the men who are destroyed by it? You must face it with full honesty and zero self-pity. Those are the two conditions. Full honesty, meaning you look at exactly what happened without softening the story for your own comfort. You name your part in it. You do not minimize. You do not dramatize. You simply see it clearly, the way a surgeon sees a wound, not with panic, not with disgust, but with the calm precision of someone who is preparing to heal. And zero self-pity, because self-pity is the poison that shame produces when it is not processed properly. Self-pity says, this happened to me, and it was unfair, and I am the most unfortunate man who ever lived. And while that feeling is understandable, it is lethal to your future. Because the moment you crown yourself the king of suffering, you have accepted a throne in a kingdom with no future. The man who faces shame with honesty and without self-pity transforms it. He metabolizes it. He turns it into fuel. He takes the energy that shame produces, which is enormous, which is volcanic, and he redirects it not into bitterness, not into depression, not into the numbing comfort of distraction, but into relentless, disciplined, purposeful action. And that action, that shame fueled, truth driven, unbreakable action, eventually becomes success. Not borrowed success, not fragile success, not success that trembles when it is challenged, success that is free, free from the fear of being exposed because you have already exposed yourself to yourself, free from the fear of failure because you have already survived the worst of it, free from the need for constant external validation because the most important judge has already spoken, and that judge lives inside your own chest, and he has already rendered his verdict. You are not your worst moment. You are what you chose to become after your worst moment. And that verdict, that is the one that matters. That is the one that lasts. That is the one that you carry forward with a kind of quiet, unshakable, undefeatable confidence that no one can manufacture, no one can give you, and no one, no matter how hard they try, can ever take away from you. Because they can take your money, they can damage your reputation, they can close certain doors and speak certain words and create certain obstacles. But they cannot touch the man who has already faced his deepest shame and decided, with full awareness and full will, that he would rather be rebuilt than remain broken. That man is free, and freedom, real, earned, unshakable freedom, is the only platform from which true, lasting, magnificent success can ever be built. So face your shame. Face it today. Face it with courage and honesty, and the understanding that what you are walking through is not destroying you. It is designing you. And on the other side of that facing, success will not feel like a prize you finally won. It will feel like something that was always yours, that you simply had to become worthy of carrying. Everything spoken today comes down to one singular, unbreakable truth, that no man earns the right to carry success freely until he has first had the courage to face what shamed him completely. The world will always celebrate the arrival, but it is the journey through darkness that creates the man worthy of the destination. Shame is not a mark against your name. It is the signature of a man who tried, who fell, who felt the full weight of his humanity, and who chose, despite every reason to stay down, to rise. That choice, made in private, made in pain, made without applause or guarantee, is the most important choice a man ever makes. And every success that follows will carry the fingerprints of that choice. Every achievement will be anchored in the quiet knowledge that you survived something that was designed to stop you. That is not ordinary success. That is freedom. And you, yes, you are more than capable of earning it.